Last weekend, my wife and a couple of friends of ours, we went to Berlin, and I took my Moleskine sketchbook, and this is the on the EasyJet plane. On EasyJet plane to Berlin, and this is Philip, who's sitting next to me, who I've met, and he's watching me sketch as I'm going along, and we're having a little conversation. He wants to be on YouTube, so say hello. Hello. When we got to Berlin, we were waiting for our luggage to come on the conveyor belt, so I did a quick little sketch of that. And in the evening, we went out to eat with a friend of ours who had a coupe colonial, which was a lemon sorbet, and vodka in this fancy glass. And while we were eating, across the road, there was an apartment block, and I was just kind of drawing. Generally, you see square windows quite a lot, which you don't see where we are. And it's these little details that make things different from one place to another. The next day, we went to the Pergamon Museum, which is kind of like the British Museum, but it made me realise that both the British Museum and the Pergamon Museum were really about aggrandisement of our own different empires in the past, and all the things in these buildings are kind of plunder from countries that we, in the past, sort of took over and as part of our empires. And I was amazed how so much in the Pergamon Museum I'd never seen or heard of before, and that's because in Britain we're kind of fed stuff that came from the British Empire, and in Germany they're obviously fed stuff that came from the German Empire, and we don't want to know about each other's past empires. So, I faced up to a lot of cultural prejudices over this trip, which was really interesting. I loved this. There was a big basin, a big water tank. It was kind of like a pond, really, and carved on the side were what looked like these fish people. And I got rather intrigued by them and imagined them going off having a big procession of the fish people. And then there was an old photograph of an Arab who'd been helping in the archaeology dig, and he had his headdress on really tightly and very dark in there, and it just looked like a spaceman. So I just drew a little kind of thing, imagine. And, and there's all that thing about, were the pyramids built by spacemen, and, all these. It's just ideas as they come into my head. And then I got a bit carried away with these fish people, yes. This was kind of a water bottle, I think. I remember these as a kid when I lived in Germany as a kid, and we used to have water delivered in these kind of bottles. Apollinaris, I think it was called. This was the German History Museum, that's right. I love these little somebody preaching, and these were the words that they were preaching coming off on little banners, I think. And I really like this idea. This is a propaganda thing against Martin Luther. I don't know in whichever century it was, and they called him Martin Luther the many-headed heretic, and they had all these different heads that he appeared to be. And then alongside it, there was another picture of some saint whose face had been defaced, which sort of, I don't know, just puts ideas into my head of defaced portraits. I love this. This was a doll, and it opened up at the front, and inside was a kitchen. So it's kind of telling the girls exactly where they were supposed to be from a very early age. Your place is in the kitchen, girls. So later on, we went to had a cup of coffee in the McDonald's. They had these interesting chairs, which I drew. The next day, we went to the Gemälde Museum, which has all the ancient paintings. And while we were waiting for it to open up, I sat and sketched the Berlin Chamber Music Hall, which is a kind of a smaller version of the Symphony Hall, which was sort of shining away in the morning. And the Gemälde Museum was fabulous. It comes in two wings that kind of stretch down. One side is kind of Northern European art, and the other is Southern European art, and they're arranged in chronological order, which was really, really interesting. They got some fantastic stuff there, and it was interesting to see them separated like that. It gave me lots and lots of ideas. I loved this picture of a balloon. I don't know when this was. It was 18th century or something, going off with a little boat underneath it, and a little stand, so you could go on balloon rides. And they're still doing balloon rides in Berlin. We thought of going, but we didn't. And inside the Gemälde Museum, which is very modern, there's all this light and angles and things coming. So while I was waiting for my friends to buy their souvenirs, I went and sat and sketched that very quickly. We were desperately hungry to find somewhere, and I said, oh yes, I remember seeing this place called the Sony Centre, which is like a huge shopping mall kind of place. So while we were inside, it's like a huge courtyard surrounded by buildings, all with mirrored glass, and this kind of sort of sail pattern on the ceiling, and the ceiling then gets reflected in the glass. So I was sort of drawing exactly what I saw in front of me. So this is sort of mirrored glass with the ceiling reflected in it. Then we went into deepest East Berlin to the Stasi Museum, and these were some people sitting on the train, on the U-Bahn, the subway, and I just kind of painted them while we were going along. Afterwards, now this is kind of Alexanderplatz, view from Alexanderplatz, and this is the East German European TV tower, which they built as a kind of a big thing to sort of look over West Berlin. It's a very strange place, Berlin, and you've always got this kind of east-west thing going on. And then we stopped to have a beer at a little restaurant by the river, and I couldn't quite see the whole of the the cathedral opposite on the other side of the river because of where we were sitting, but I could see the top of it. So I kind of drew the top of the domes and everything while we were having a beer, and a lovely sunny evening. And then on the way home, we were waiting for at Alexanderplatz again, we were waiting for our subway train to come along, our U-Bahn, and I was really taken by all the sort of steel work in the subway stations. So I went and sat and drew that. I don't know, it probably took me about 3 minutes or something like that, and painted it on the platform. Just finished painting just as the train came in. And these are things we were having for a meal that night. And this pattern here I remember as a child when we lived in Germany, these kind of chevrons, and I always remember them as being saying verboten, do not enter. We went to Checkpoint Charlie, which is where the East met the West, and they have a museum there now. So these were sections of the Berlin Wall which they have there. In fact, while I was drawing it, then this little child came up to it and just sort of stood in front of it and put his hand on the wall, and it was kind of quite touching. I had to do a quick little sketch of that to remind myself. Later on, we went to a place called Cafe Einstein and had a cup of tea, very expensive cup of tea. It was the first flush of the Darjeeling pick of this year, apparently. And then I went right up on top of a big church there, the Franzocher Dome in the Gendarmenmarkt. People have often asked me about, can I show you how to draw cityscapes? And I've been a bit reticent in doing that. But I really quite enjoyed doing this while I was there. I was very aware of having friends with me and they wanting to get on and do things, whereas I just want to sit there and draw. So I was feeling very pressurised to get things done quickly. While we were having a cup of tea in Unter den Linden at the Einstein Cafe, I was looking across the road and all these things, that they have a very low water table in Berlin, and they're doing a lot of work making new underground subway systems and things. So they have to pump the water out and have these aerial pipes all over the place, taking water away, going across roads and all the way down pavements and sidewalks and things. Very strange. And I started drawing, and I had this moment of freedom suddenly where I thought I could just do what I like. And I started with the blue pipe, and then so this is a cityscape, but it's kind of abstracted in a way, in that this is not the exact scene that I saw, and I'm just putting things in there in a kind of a random kind of way, making a sort of a pattern. There was the Aeroflot building across the road, but I've just put the Aeroflot name. I haven't put the whole building in, and all these street signs. It's just clutter, so I just kind of put it all in as an impression rather than a representation, as a photographic representation of what was in front of me. Does that make sense? I don't know. I suddenly felt, I feel liberated that I can do this. And then I put Reichstag. It's not. It's the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin there. So I sort of sat there and drew that while my wife had an ice cream. And this is on the journey home, on the way back, waiting, always waiting. for your flight to be called. And there's this very interesting guy who came past and he was having a very animated conversation. So he just seemed to sum up a lot of people I'd seen in Berlin. So that's my Berlin Moleskine sketchbook, which has run out. But luckily, on the last day, we went to KaDeWe, which is like the big Harrods, the big expensive shopping store, department store, and I got myself a new Moleskine notebook. These are the ones that I use. So it's a watercolour notebook, Carnet Aquarelle. It's 5.5 by 3.5 inches, 14 by 9. They do a bigger one actually, but this just fits nicely in your pocket and easy to take out. So there we go. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. And if you did, go and have a look at my Brussels trip sketchbook or have a go at the mystery drawing. See my other channel, Draw Stuff Real Easy, and make sure you're subscribed and keep coming back for more drawing lessons and advice. If you like this kind of video, do let me know and maybe I'll do some more. It's a kind of drawing my life in a different kind of way, isn't it? Meantime, keep drawing. Practice, and I'll see you next time. You take care now. Bye-bye.